Welcome everyone, Christine here with another political discussion video about the United States and Iran, because there's a lot of people freaking out, especially given the events that just happened last night. Well, I mean last night in the sense that they happened last night in Iraq. It really has become, in a sense, a battlefield for the proxy war that's going on between the United States and Iran, but the chances of a direct conflict remain low. And you don't have to take my personal word for it. I can give you The Economist, the intelligence unit, highly respected. In brief, the US targeted strike is a massive blow to Iran and a pivotal event in the buildup of Iranian-US tensions. The risk that the two countries will enter into a full-blown conflict has increased, but we still do not expect this. Instead, Iran is likely to target US and coalition forces, and given their long-standing opposition to the US, Iranian hardliners will strengthen their grip on the economy. Take the presidency in the 2021 election. So that's what The Economist has to say on the subject. Now, of course, this was before the recent strikes, but everyone expected Iran would retaliate for what happened on Friday, and Iran did retaliate to the actions the Trump administration took in a fairly limited fashion. The missile strike that they engineered has basically had a limited impact, as in no one's died based on what we are aware. No one's claimed, wounded soldiers, let alone dead soldiers. Like from the Hill, missiles hit Iraq bases housing U.S. troops. Iran claims responsibility. President Trump said he plans to address the country on Wednesday morning after Iran claimed responsibility for the launch of missiles at a pair of military bases in Iraq, housing U.S. troops and coalition personnel, a marked escalation in the conflict between the two countries. The Pentagon, in a statement, said Iran had launched more than a dozen ballistic missiles against U.S. military and coalition forces in Iraq. It's clear that these missiles were launched from Iran and targeted at least two Iraqi military bases hosting U.S. military and coalition personnel. We are aware of the reported attacks. Okay. Iran's foreign minister Javad Zarif called the attacks a proportional measure in self-defense in a tweet Tuesday night, adding, "We do not seek escalation of war, but we will defend ourselves against any aggression." Trump tweeted moments later that all is well, adding, "Assessment of casualties and damage is taking place right now. So far, so good." Now, the point is, and the article goes on to explain, everything else. You can check the Economist intelligence unit, and as well as the Hill article in the links in the description below. Now, there is no one saying at the moment, that could very well change, but there is no one saying at the moment that there have been any casualties yet. So Iran has struck, but Iran has done so in a fairly limited fashion. Basically, the ball is in Trump's court, and this is where we get into exactly why there won't be a direct conflict. When I say a direct conflict, I'm talking the U.S. striking Iran directly, not striking its forces, in Iraq or in other places. I'm talking of a direct military attack on Iran itself. Why won't the U.S. do it? For Trump, there's a couple of reasons. One of those actually has to do with the military. So let's talk about the situation with the U.S. military before we talk about anything that actually concerns Trump. See, for the Pentagon, for the DoD, the problems they're facing is that the U.S. military has been fighting conflicts around the world continuously for the last 20 years. It's pretty insane. No country in the world would do anything like it. No country in the world would have the capability of doing something like this, and no country in the world has done something. Like, yes, there are countries that have had long-running conflicts, but near their borders or inside their borders, the U.S. is the only country on the planet that is involved in conflicts very far away from home. Now, what this means is that the U.S. spends a lot on its military, less so than it actually needs to, believe it or not, considering the requirements they're put through. They need more money than they're actually allocated for all the things that Congress and American politicians want to do. When people talk about defense spending, they talk about the idea, if defense spending is lower, the U.S. will get involved in less conflicts. That's not really how it works. The U.S. gets involved in less conflict is if the American political leadership decides to do that, which it hasn't. Congress, American politicians, and the various administrations are very fond of getting involved in conflicts. Have been very fond. Bush, Obama, especially so. Anyway, so that's one of the situations that the U.S. is dealing with. To give some example, if there was a direct conflict between Iran and the U.S., Iran, well, a much larger country than Iraq, would require thousands of cruise missiles, of Tomahawk cruise missiles to strike, as well as many other munitions, as well as hundreds of thousands of troops. Yes, there are a lot of troops being deployed, like there's an entire brigade being deployed from the 82nd Airborne. There's battalions of companies of Rangers being deployed, Marines being deployed. I believe that there's a carrier strike group near the region, and the Marines are probably also sending 2 or 3 amphibious assault ships. And what are amphibious assault ships? Well, simply put, if you were to look at World War II, they're like escort carriers. They don't have the capability of super carriers, but they are more flexible. They carry infantry, they carry tanks, they carry a whole range of options. Helicopters as well. They have a whole range of options available to them. So there's flexibility there, and they do carry aircraft, Harriers in particular. The whole discussion about the F-35B is also involving deploying them on those kind of ships. So there's troops being deployed, but nowhere near enough to deal with a country like Iran. To give some idea, it would take thousands of cruise missiles. The United States stock, the total stock of the United States right now of Tomahawk cruise missiles is somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000. We don't quite really know the exact count, really. I believe the figure I've seen is 3,500, but I'm not entirely certain. Anyway, around that mark. So imagine the U.S. spending all of its Tomahawk cruise missiles to deal with Iran. They could do so. They would also lose their superpower status against China. Because at the end of the day, the Department of Defense wants to focus on China. They don't want to get involved in another conflict like this. And they are struggling with munitions. Because we talk a lot about, and the press talks a lot about tanks and planes and ships and all that. Well, very important things, right? But what about bullets? What about bombs? What about missiles? Also very expensive. I mean, they've gotten more and more expensive over the years. They've gotten more advanced. And the United States is really the only country right now in the world that maintains large stocks of them. And even they have less than they used to have. Like there used to be a period where the U.S. had 10,000 Tomahawk cruise missiles or more. Now they have less of those. And it's just because it's enormously expensive. So the U.S. has no desire, because of its military situation, has no desire. The Department of Defense has no desire to get involved in a direct military conflict against Iran. A proxy one, an indirect one, and even the events that have happened just last night, yes. That's something that they would get, that they can, but a full-blown direct military conflict, no. And that is the first point. Then, of course, you get the political discussion, because war is a continuation of politics. For Trump, he doesn't want to get involved in a direct conflict, a war with Iran, for 2 reasons. One, he knows that he has to focus on other things. I mean, his advisors at the very least know his administration is focused on China, so they are concerned by the same thing. But on top of that, he also doesn't want to be involved because he doesn't think he'd benefit from it in any way. And it's not just about the election. Though one has to remind themselves of how Donald Trump went after Jeb Bush and destroyed his candidacy for a Republican nomination in 2016 by going him for George Bush's Iraq War. And then he attacked Hillary for her conflicts. So Trump doesn't want the tables turned on him, and already you're seeing Democratic primary candidates attacking him for his stance on Iran. So that's one of the things, that's one of the calculations Trump has. But what about Iran? Like, what about Iran? So for Trump, it's politically unpopular. There's no support in Congress for it. They might, like if he pushes this thing too much, they might even block or limit his authority to be able to do something like that. So there is no desire to do it in the United States. What about Iran? Well, Iran has many issues. The sanctions that have been applied to Iran, and even without the sanctions, like even before Trump, Iran's economy was struggling. They're broke, basically. The best way to put it is they're broke. They're struggling financially as a country. They've had major protests, which have quieted down because of the death of a national hero. But Iran is a country that's on the brink economically, that's struggling financially, that doesn't have the resources. If a direct military conflict does occur, there is no recovery for Iran. The United States, oh yes, they'd pay for it. But Iran would effectively see the collapse of all of its regional ambitions. And so, because of that, the chances of an actual direct military conflict between the two sides is effectively nil, or rather pretty low. I wouldn't say quite zero, but very close, let's say. Because there is no appetite on either side. And of course, Trump could very well retaliate in the manner he has been proclaiming over the last couple of days. But I think that what he was trying to do on Twitter when he was threatening Iran directly was like, yeah, don't. He was trying to prevent Iran from actually killing U.S. troops, from actually doing something very harmful to the United States. And I think Iran has deliberately limited the damage that it has done as a means of de-escalation. I mean, everyone knew that Iran would retaliate, and they more or less would have to, but at the same time, the way they have done it is like, will Trump respond to it? Maybe he does, in which case tensions can escalate. But like right now, based on all that I've said, based on the situation of both these countries, politically, economically, militarily, the chance of an open, direct military conflict is low. Costin here on Serious Gaming, signing out. Thank you all for watching. I'd like to give special thanks for this video to Alain of Deathwatch, and to all of my patrons, and to all of you who make this all possible. And a note, I wish to leave this on a note for those of you that are interested in this particular kind of content. It's very difficult to make it, not necessarily because of time constraints, but because of the way YouTube treats this kind of content. Many of these political discussion videos, especially in relation to foreign policy, get demonetized. I'm not saying that this one will necessarily. I don't know if it will have ads or not. It's just like playing Russian roulette with the YouTube advertiser-friendly algorithm, and then having a person review it and decide, hey, is this fine or not? And it's always just a really weird affair, because I don't know. So if you do care about this kind of content, if you find this kind of content interesting, please do consider supporting me by PayPal, Patreon, or YouTube channel membership. Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications.